All right. The objectives tonight is we're going to talk about the install and the preparations to install Windows 2000 Server 8. Windows Server 2008, not 2000 Server 8. Understand the difference for the installation methods used to install, whether it's core, whether it's full, whether it's with or without the VMs, whether you're doing it from the command line, unintended, things of that nature. Set up, install 2008 from the initial configuration task window, and then how to activate a Server 08. Okay. We're also going to configure Windows deployment services, install service packs, which take forever and a day, troubleshoot, install installation problems. There are a lot of them, and I'm not really going to cover but one command line to uninstall Windows 2008, and that's format C:// right? That's the easy way to do it. All right, pre-installation task. What we need to do is say, is the computer that we're going to put on the system have the necessary minimum requirements? You remember the minimum requirements last week? 512 meg of memory, 40 gigs of hard drive usually. Pretty small, isn't it? You'd think, man, a server needs a lot more than that. No, it doesn't. Because all it's doing is providing a service. That's really all it's doing. How are we going to break up our disk partition options? How are we going to do the file system upgrades options? Our user licensing, that's a big issue with Microsoft. If you're a corporation, they will come and audit you. If you're a small mom and pop shop, you can basically jerk around and do whatever you wanted on there. But they'll still have a chance of them auditing you. So if you're a mom and pop shop and you're running one computer and you have 7,000 Telnet licenses, they're going to kind of question you. You know, if you're a corporation and only have 5 Telnet licenses, they're going to question you. Determine whether you're going to do a peer-to-peer work group or if you're going to do a centralized domain membership. We need to talk about the computer names. How are we going to name them? Whether we're going to do a server core, which is the command line only, or the full version of something. What kind of roles is this server going to do? What is the functionality of this particular server we're going to do? So if I tell you in the hands-on final that, Brittany, I want you just to have an application server. Anthony, I want you to have a web server. Jackson, I want you to have a file server. Cameron, I want you to have an Active Directory server. Okay. You need to know what the differences are. What are the functionalities? How are we going to do things? All right. Do what?
Do you know an organization that runs server core?
Yes. It's a mom and pop shop. I know because I'm their network administrator.
Is it a pain?
If you know PowerShell, no. It's all command line. I don't need all the GUI.
Do you ever run into any difficulties?
No, it's actually more powerful to do it with server core. They didn't have a big enough machine to run the GUI part. Basically, it was a desktop that is powering everything that they need. So I didn't want to do the GUI and have the extra 20 gigs for the GUI. So I just did it as this, and they run fine. They never touch it. Machine's plugged in. When it crashes, they're going to be dead. So, because I'm not going to rebuild it. Most operating systems come with minimum requirements, what we talked about last week, right? It's always better to exceed the recommended minimum recommendations. Why? The minimum recommendations are the ones that will allow the system to function only, not any extra features or roles. That is just the operating system. You need to know that. Because if I say, what is the minimum requirements for an active ADDS web, an application, file server, print server on a Windows 2008 machine, and you come back and you tell me 512 meg of RAM, I'm going to laugh at you. Laugh while I'm putting big red F on your paper. Because that's not true. You're going to want at least 2 gigs to run all those. Redundant array of independent disk, or RAID. How many of y'all have messed with RAID? Remember, Cameron, you were the only one. Um, RAID basically all it does is it allows you to have a redundancy. Whether you mirror, you stripe and mirror, RAID 0 to RAID 15, whichever way you want to do it. Okay. I say RAID 15 because it's RAID 1 and 5, or RAID 1 and 0 for 10. There's not 11, 12, 13, 14. All right. Hardware compatibility testing. You remember the big thing coming from going to Windows 7 from XP. Do you have this compatibility tester out there? Can you go to this next version? Is your hardware compliant? You will need X, Y, and Z drivers. Go ahead and download them now. Put them in this folder so that we can update it correctly. All that does is allows you to know that there are drivers out there. Have y'all added a new piece of hardware and you have, like, when you plug in a external flash drive or whatever, and it says, or put in a new printer, that'll probably be the easiest one. And it says you need to add your drivers, and it gives you a list of generic drivers that none of them work, and you have to download the software manufacturer's disk. And you don't get this little thing that says it must be digitally signed. All that means is that Windows has tested it, and it will work with your system. That is all that little icon means. The manufacturer may have tested all day long and made sure that it worked, and it'll work. That's why they provided that driver for you. Microsoft hasn't told you that it works with them. That's all that little icon means. When that icon works there, you're not going to have a problem with your printer, for the most part, unless your printer just acts up.
Unless it's an HP.
HPs love to do that.
Yes.
BIOS, the binary input-output system, or the basic input-output system, could be something that you're going to need to update or flash, depending on its settings. I've never run into where I had to update BIOS when I put in a new operating system. Because usually I've already replaced the motherboard and stuff. For example, if you try to put Windows 7 on an old AT, not ATX machine, it was powered by an AT power processor, or the AT power supply, you'll run into issues. I'm sorry, I'm getting a head cold, I think. And I'm not pulling another instructor on you. That's why I was here tonight. I wasn't going to do that to y'all. All right, determining the BIOS version, we'll do that on Thursday. It says take about 10 minutes. I could care less about y'all doing that one. All right, you could do it, but they're locked down, so you can't get into the setup anyway to see it. All right, creating a disk partition. You can do this one of two ways. You can do FDisk. Y'all have heard that term before, right? In the hardware class, where you can create multiple partitions, format them, and then install onto them. Or the Windows Server, Windows installation disk starting after XP allowed you to do, or with XP started allowing you to do that. So you could format, erase, modify. Basically, it comes with FDisk, a graphical version of FDisk. And here's what you're going to see. When you first come up to Windows, you'll see this icon that says, okay, how do you want to install Windows, or where do you want to install it? Why is D ahead of C? Anyone know? D is ahead of C because there are two different reasons. Number one, that with it 2 gigs and 1.9 available, I'm assuming the only thing that's on this one right now is the master boot record. That's what that's for. Sometimes you'll get a third one that'll say system recovery. That's where it has a backup of the operating system. In the event that it fails, it can go back to that system restore. Okay, it will set it on its own partition. But that's where it dictates it and sees it. You can also go into, after you get the server, you can go into disk management and you can screw around with it as much as you want. Notice this is a FAT32 partition versus a NTFS partition. Someone had a removable flash drive in there. But we'll get into more disk management a little bit later on. We don't have a prior 2003 image for y'all to play with. I mean, I could create one and put one out there. I don't want to take the time to do it, so we won't do this lab because it's not really necessary. Because all we're doing is looking right here at server management, which we can do when we get to Windows 8. When we talk about server management, we'll cover that area. All right. I don't want to make you think that I'm just intentionally skipping it. There's a reason why I'm skipping it. Because I'm not going to have you install something, have an O3 and then install. Does it make sense? The NTFS is the new transfer file system, or new technology file system. I always screw that up. It is the newest type of file system that is used on Windows-based computers. It includes local security, compression, disk quotas, encryption, and indexing. Why is that important? Those are new features that FAT did not have. The file allocation table. You couldn't secure a set of bits. You know, BitLocker has now become very famous with Windows because of this NTFS. You can compress and encrypt your drives. You know, y'all have seen those radio buttons or the check marks. Compress this folder to save space, or encrypt it, or read only, things of that nature. Disk quotas, I can say, Cameron, you're allowed 10 gigs. Anthony, you're allowed 3 terabytes. Man, I'm picking on you tonight, all right. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with it. And then you have the PySix, which is the Portable Operating System Interface. All it is just a design to enable the portability of applications from one to another. It's pretty basic. So I can move an application from one machine to another, to another, to another. Journaling basically keeps track of all the filing changes, your metadata. When you get into forensics, this area right here becomes your big friend. Turn on journaling so you can go and see who's done what to what. Mysteriously, this document disappeared. Well, who deleted it? That'll tell you. Okay. Here's the minimum requirements. You cannot install 2008 on a FAT partition. It has to be in TFS. That is something you'll need to know. Just like you can't install a 2008 R2, supposedly, on a 32-bit system. It has to be a 64-bit system. I know that's wrong because I've put it on a 32-bit system. It still functions, I just can't do any hyper-threading and things of that nature. Command prompt. If I want to convert the file system of a FAT to an NTFS, all you got to do is do convert space, whatever drive you want to, space, or colon space, backslash. FS means what file system I'm going to go to, colon, and then whether it's going to be FAT, FAT32, NTFS. It runs it, tells you what it did, and then it'll come up and say, it's done. Isn't that nice? All right. Here are the equivalents in what you can upgrade to. If I have a 03 Enterprise with Service Pack 1 or 2, I go to 08 Standard or Enterprise. Make sense? If I have a R2, 2003 R2 Standard, I go to 08 Standard or Enterprise. If I have 03 Enterprise Edition with Service Pack 1 or 2, I can only go to the Enterprise. If I have Enterprise Edition, I can only go to Enterprise. If I have a Data Center Edition, I have to go to Data Center. Does that make sense? So if you have an Enterprise here, you can still go to the Standard or the Enterprise of here because it's not R2. But once I add the R2 to it, I have to go to the Enterprise. Make sense? All right. By default, Standard and Enterprise give you 25 cals. All right. What does that do? What is a client access license? Anyone know? Just means these people can connect virtually to the server. Now, there's a glitch in Microsoft's licensing. If you read Microsoft's regulations on how they built their licensing for 2003, and it carried over to 2008 because they forgot about it, is we have two ways to license: per user or per seat. Okay, per seat means this particular computer. All right, per user means it's by the user account. I can come from anywhere. Okay, so long as I use my user account. By default, they give you 5 per seat accounts. Well, with a per seat account, it has to know the license number. It has to connect directly to a licensing server and be authenticated through Windows. Okay, for a per seat, so a device. The client access license, by default, you only get 5 of them, right? So that means 5 devices can connect to my server, period. If I use per user, they say it only needs to find a licensing server. So thus, my terminal services or my client access only has to find a licensing server, and then I can get unlimited people to connect through Telnet. Microsoft screwed themselves out of money.
Let's say, does Microsoft condone that?
No, they don't. But they fixed the glitch, and they say, well, there's nothing we can do about it because we've already said here's this. And when they put it out there, they did it to themselves. Because 5 licenses is usually about $200, about $40 a shot. That's where it eats you up in the cost of servers. Server operating system, $199. The licenses for them, astronomical. All right. Determining the domain and the workgroup membership. We're going to call this profstokely.com, right? So profstokely.com, which actually that is one of the websites I have. I just don't do anything with it. We'll call that our domain. All the computers in the room will connect to that domain. Does that make sense? If I did it as a work group, it'd just be a singular NetBIOS name like work group. That'll be peer-to-peer. Everyone has to deal with y'all know the difference between the domain and a work group. Okay, choosing computer name, you want to make sure that it's known, something easily identifiable. Maybe the room dash, the row dash, the seat. Does it make sense? 215 dash B dash 3. So Amanda's seat. Okay. Well, actually, we're in 214. So 214, row B, 3rd seat from the wall. That would identify her machine is that. You want to make sure it's different than any other one because of WINS. Because if you don't have a DNS in your internal network, you can do it with WINS server or service and run it that way. You can't use... you could use, if DNS is present, special characters. I wouldn't recommend them anyway, because if you use $, you're basically saying, hey, make this a share, because it's a reserved. Really? All right. Now, are we going to install on a core, or are we going to install on a full? Well, it really depends on what you want to do. If you're medium or large, you're going to want to really do it on a full so that you can actually see and implement everything that you need to do. Your organization can have a lot of share folders, centralized databases. You want that common domain that you have a lot of other possibilities on. If you're a medium-sized business, For core, if you really want to make sure that people can't get to what they need to, or mess around, you want to do it on the core side. If you have a lot of different applications, it's quicker and easier to run. And I'll show you how that when we do the server manager command. For the full version, that's going to be all the GUI based. If you have anything that you have .NET applications have to run on, you have to run it in the GUI. You got it down, Amanda?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Active Directory Certificate Services. Basically, all it does is there are 4 different services that you can see in Table 2.2, which we'll get to in a few minutes. ADDS, which is basically LDAP. Y'all familiar with the term LDAP? I think I mentioned that last week to y'all, right? And then Federation Services. That's all. Federation Services deals with security. Just think about it that way. But if you're trying to certify a system, it's the certificate service. If you are looking for security, like authentication, protocols, things like that, it's going to be your Federation Services. You have 4 different types. You have the Online Certificate Status Protocol, or the OCSP. You get that from an off-site service that can revoke or renew or create you a certificate. You don't have to have a local replication list for that at that point. Does that make sense? The Microsoft Simple Certificate Enrollment Protocol basically allows all your network devices to gain access to your server by their certificates. Certification Authority, used to set up the use of digital certificates for user accounts and computers. So I can create a certificate for you so that I know you're a trusted member of my network. And then the Authority Web Enrollment, any type of web communication, smart cards, things of that nature. Those are the 4 ways that you can do with certificates. Then we have Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, or LDAP, the Active Directory version. Basically, all it does is for applications. Now, these are test questions on Microsoft Test that I'm referring to. You need to know what the difference between these directory services. The rights management, what do you think it's going to do? It uses the security tools that we had in Federation Services for encryption, authentication, and certificates. Does that make sense? That's the validation part. Application server, and it makes applications available to those that come in through the Internet Information System or come in through Apache, any web-based applications. DHCP, it gives me the IP address, or forces IP addresses out to the local machine so that they can access the internet with a gateway and the protocol. That's what DHCP does. DNS, all it does is maintain a routing table that has domain name and IP address. That's all it is. It's just like how many of you are familiar with the host file? Have y'all ever seen the host file? I don't know if I can get to it here, but let me see. All right. Windows. Come on down. System 32. Drivers, etc. Okay. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? You know what that is? The SAM file. lmhost SAM file. I get into this file, if I breach it, I can add myself an account on your system. Security Amounts Manager, okay? Here's my host file. Let me... Okay. No. Alright. No, come on. Close. Alright. Well, what I can do here is I can make a local... Seeing if I can't make this bigger for y'all. Let's go here to, where's my properties? Up top. Font. Easier to see now? Okay. What a host file does is it is a local DNS file. Essentially is what it means. It means if anyone types in the word localhost, it will be resolved with this IP address. So, for giggles, I want to go to ping google.com. So 164.58.87.16, right? You want to catch that? Okay. So, or I'm sorry, I should say anyone that types in the that will come to this. So let's try 164.58.87.16. Daggone it, I'm losing my mind. 164, y'all remember this, 164.58.87.16. Right?
I thought it
Was it 164 or 154?
was the last number you said it was
164.
15.
164.
It was 164?
Yes.
And it's 15?
That's what I heard you say the first time.
I thought it was 16.
Oh, it was
You said
16.
15 the first time.
164.58.87.16.
Okay.
Okay.
So I had it written down as 15.
All right. So, what do I want it to do? Let's say if I go to www.yahoo.com, right? Now let me save this. But if you save this document, I know what I can do. File, save as, all files on my desktop. Then what I'm going to do for my desktop is I want to go back into here and see if it's going to let me. System 32, drivers. Anyway, you put it in there, and so what would do is anyone that go type in yahoo.com, it would send them to Google. Every time they would type in yahoo.com, they would go to Google. So, if you really want to be mean to somebody, just do star.star.star for the domain www.star. So, anything after that's fine. And point them to a porn site.
Yep.
And move that onto their local computer if you want to get rid of them, right? And that's how that does it. Because it's a local DNS. It checks that first before it goes out to your DNS to find the name. I told you I'm malicious.
That's pretty dirty.
It's fun though.
That's common.
Huh?
So that's common.
All right. Fax server role. You can do it to where you have eFaxes. but you have to have a modem into your server so that the faxes can come in so it can answer it. And then what it can do is it can forward those faxes depending on the number that you have for your server and certain criteria on the fax. It can forward it to whoever needs to see it. File services role, all it does is allow you to file, store and share different files throughout the network. Hyper-V role allows you to have that virtual server, which we talked a little bit about. NAP we talked about last time, which is Network Policy Access Services role. Make sure you have a healthy network, everything's up to date and whatnot. Print services, it allows you to do print, file, and sharing from one. You can have everything spooled from that server out, so all printers in the network are connected to that one server. So when it sends a print device, instead of it spooling on their machine and going to the printer, it spools on the server, so you can have a priority. UDDI service, basically that's for your web applications, and it really discovers if you have anything else. Web server IIS role could also be Apache, but Server 8 or any Windows comes with IIS. All right. Windows Development Services role allows you to do. You can purchase multiple computers without operating systems and then install multiple OS on them. So when you're talking about enterprise licenses, like when we buy all these computers here, we buy it under deployment services, and then we give the license key, saying, here's how many machines we have. When we buy the machine, we have their individual key. But we say, we're buying this, so we're not purchasing this license as an individual license, we're buying one big one, so that's why you have those enterprise keys that you hear about, so the network administrator only has to know one key. So I can deploy that computer anywhere I want. Okay, verifying server roles, fine. Immediate preparations, basically, you want to make sure you have everything that you need right on hand, your drivers, your CDs or DVDs for the install. You're not going to have to worry about all that stuff because it's already out there for us on VM. The primary installation methods for Windows 2000 Server 8 is a DVD. You can upgrade from Windows 2003, or you can do a virtual server with Hyper-V, or you can push it out with deployment services. Any of those options. We can also do unintended installs too, which I'll show you all how to do that too. That's always the fun one. When we go through the administrator folder on a Windows 2K8, and we can do a unintended install. So we build an answer key. It answers all the questions for you. You hit it, and it just zips through everything for you. All right. To start the installation from a DVD, basically you turn it on. It says boot to CD or DVD. You hit the key. You go in there. Right. If you want to upgrade, you start from the desktop of the previous version. So you're already on server 03. You put the disk in. Pops up a little thing. Do you want to upgrade? Say upgrade. Or click the install Windows button, and then follow the instructions from there on out. This is what it's going to look like if you do it from inside. You can also start it here if you just want to blow away your old server, and then you can do that and format your old drive out and whatnot. Usually, if you're just going to upgrade to a Windows Server 8, it'll give you upgrade. After you click install now, it'll give you the choice whether you want to do a custom or do you want to upgrade. And if you can't upgrade, then it's going to have it grayed out and you can only do custom, and that's when you go in and install everything. Doing through Hyper-V, basically you put the disk in, install it just like a VM would anywhere else, right? Y'all understand that? Amanda, you okay? Tired? Windows Deployment Service, basically all it does is it allows you to enable this deployment of this image, i.e. all the new lab images. They set up deployment services, pushed it out on all these computers. That's all it is. They created an ISO image and said flush it to all these computers. Installing Windows 2K8 from a DVD usually takes about 30 minutes, depending on how fast your server is, and goes from there. If you're using the initial configuration task for Windows, you can stop it at that point. You can update it, you can customize it, or you can provide computer information. That's the first one that after you click to install, that's the first thing that's going to come up. Do you want to have it upgraded, or do you want to customize it? Okay, that's the initialization task window. Then it'll ask you what is going to be the computer name, what will be the administrator name, things of that nature. Get general information. Allows you to do that right off the bat. after everything is done and you got it installed, here's the initial configuration task. It's going to say set your time zone. Always defaults to Pacific time because Microsoft's in Seattle. How are you going to configure your networking? You can do IPv4, IPv6. That's totally up to y'all. Provide the computer name. It'll always be a win-whatever and work group by default. And there is no rhyme or reason to this. So don't even try to figure it out. It's just random characters. Alright. Updating the server. Always make sure the updates are automatic. It'll tell you Windows error reporting. I'll leave it off because I don't want them to know what I'm doing with my server anyway. And if it's got an error, I'm sure I can go Google and find out how to fix it. Download and install updates. Checked for updates. Tells you the last time it actually checked for them. Because what happens if this one never changes, but you keep installing updates? Isn't that strange? I've actually seen it. You know why that is? It's because it's a virus. This date should never be less than that date. Should always be equal to or greater than. Because you want to check for updates all the time. You may not have to install anything. So your install updates needs to be older or equal to the date what the checkup date is. If it's opposite, you have a problem. Easy way to check for a virus. Here's where you add your roles and features. And as you can keep on scrolling down, there's other things you can do. We're going to play around a little bit with that on Thursday. Server activation. It's pretty simple. It comes up and says, hey, your server needs to be activated within 3 days. Click here to activate. You click it and say activate. You can activate via the internet or a telephone, just like you've been able to do with any of the other ones. And I usually just do the internet because it's nice and easy and takes 10 seconds. Using deployment services, basically you can install it on 2K8 or Vista or 7. It retains the ability to install O3 and XP if you need to. Provides updated boot format information. Basically, it helps you out. Okay, if you have tons of computers to do, you can do them all at once. And you don't have to go to each individual computer. So imagine Adam and Jerry with their 2 workers that they have in there. And they've got several hundred computers up here. How long would, if you're talking an hour for each computer to be imaged, how long is that going to be? I can do Windows Deployment Service, trigger it at night, come back in the morning, and it's done. A lot easier, isn't it? Because what we do is what we call the PXE boot. Y'all familiar with the PXE boot? Have y'all ever seen that on there? Brittany, you saw it when you were out at the church. It comes up and says PXE boot, 15 seconds, and it gives you some IP address and a subnet mask. That's pointing to where this image is. So if I want to do a PXE boot, I want it to come to this image. That's all it's doing.
So is it on a disk?
Uh-huh. You don't have to first boot to an operating system to access that way. That's what PXE does.
Guess I didn't realize that's what it was.
That allows you to push things out. Because when it first comes up, it says, oh, okay, I have hard disk, but I don't have anything on it. If I say enable PXE boot, it's going to go look to that IP address to pull that operating system down and install it. That's all PXE's for. All right. And that's good if you have other things you want to, applications or whatever you want to install. Requirements. If you're going to use deployment services, you have to have a DNS, you have to have a DHCP, you have to have ADDS already installed, and it has to be on an NTFS file system. No duh. Why are we putting this in here? Because if you're ADDS, your DHCP and DNS, and you're running an 08, you already have to have that by default. It's because you can run deployment services from 2003. But all the machines have to have NTFS. But you have to have NTFS file system on that deployment server. Okay? And we'll get through that. Elements of the unattended installation. You can create a client-side unattended install file called unattend.xml, and then we can put it in the WDS client unattend folder. And we can push that folder out to every computer prior to. let's say we're updating it, then what we do is we configure deployment services to look at that and find that file on that local machine. Make sense? I create this unattended file on my server or on a desktop. I copy it, and then I do a batch file to push it out to all the computers into this directory. Then what happens is I configure the deployment services to look for that unattended file, which is my answer file for each one of those machines. Make sense? Now, why would you only have one XML file? Well, each computer has a different name, right? What do you think?
What?
Each computer has its own different name, right?
Yeah.
So, if I created one here and call it, in there it says computer name and I say Scott, I've now told all the computers to be Scott. Am I going to have a nightmare?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why you create this client-side unattended file on that local machine with that machine's name. That takes me 5 minutes compared to an hour for each machine. And I can go from boom, 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 because it takes it a minute to go through it. Have someone come in behind you. Or, if I want to be smart, I can use variable names, like the machine domain, the username, and leave these variables in that unattended install, and then push my batch file out. Makes it a lot easier now, doesn't it? Because if I say my machine name, if I already have a machine that I've pushed it out to, it's going to take that machine's name anyway. Then I can put in the new domain for the machine if I'm changing the domains. I put all these variables in there if I want to.
Kind of hard to see, but I was curious.
What is what?
Like
The percent sign? Username, percent sign? Especially when we get into profiles and we're creating profiles, or we're going to create a home directory for somebody. You've always wondered why when you turn on your computer you have a home directory. I'll show you all how to do that. Pretty simple. Create roaming profiles. Y'all have heard those terms before. So no matter what computer you go to, when you log in, that your profile gets put in. Here's the properties for that deployment service. Unintended install. Then I say, okay, I want this. Click browse for any one of those types of architectures, and do not create an account in the domain after running it, because you don't want them to already create a client account, or you do. You know, that's up to you. Apply OK, because you're setting all this information up, and then you're done. Installing Windows Core is pretty easy. It's just like the full, except all you get is command lines. All right. And you can implement ADDS, ADLS, DHCP, DNS, file, web, print, all that stuff. But that's what you get when you get a server core. Quite different than your normal machine, right? Not all role services can be installed in the full installation environment. You have to go through PowerShell, or you have to go through command prompt to do it through Server Manager command. And then we can deal with that. We use the start command to look for a particular install a role, or the -uninstall option to uninstall a role. All right. Service packs easy. Just go to the page and download them from Windows Update. They're pains in the wazoo, but basically all it is a group of patches put together. And they say, we had 300 patches. We're just going to put it all together in one. You get this one that updates all 300. That's really all it does. Troubleshooting installation problems. Basically, if you had a problem with your install, you know what you screwed up. There's not really much you can do to screw it up. Make sure that all the hardware you have is correct, that it can run on the 08 server. And then here's some basic stuff that you can do to check, but that's in your book. If you want to uninstall it, like we said, you can do fdisk or format, or you can do disk part. That's the easy way to do them. All right. Any questions? Pretty straightforward, right? Well, like I say, when we come back on Thursday, we're going to start going through this, and you're going to do step-by-step labs. All right?